gonna just turn up the brightness and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, it is already recording.
Okay. Hey everyone, welcome back to Between Two Interns, where I am Eric.
And I'm Jemima.
Strategy intern at Cossette.
And I'm an accounts delivery intern, also at Cossette.
So today we wanted to give a broad overview and just talk a little bit about marketing and the ethics involved. I think it's a big gray area, especially for some people, understanding how much of it can be kind of manipulative puppet masters as opposed to just people bringing forward things that the consumers already desire.
Do you think, is that the common perception people have of marketing, like puppet masters?
I think that it's not a common perception, but it's a place that you could go. Honestly, if you're a pessimist, I'd say. But people that make that argument, they have some interesting points. But I think it ultimately comes down to perspective. I don't see it that way. I don't think a lot of people do, but the arguments are there.
How do your non-advertising friends react when you tell them you work in advertising?
I don't think I've gotten a negative response, really.
Are they just kind of like, oh, okay, cool, and then they just kind of move on?
Well, yeah, for the most part, it's just like, oh, nice, sweet. Maybe even because they don't exactly know entirely what I do on a day-to-day basis. I didn't know what I would do before going to school for it.
Okay.
Yeah. But that kind of puppet master, like, whole, I guess stigma, but it's not big enough to be that. It's something that, yeah, kind of like falls into the background of my thinking. It came back to the forefront. I saw it in an episode of Mad Men yesterday.
Is that what today's podcast episode is about?
It might have been inspired by Mad Men. For those that don't know, Mad Men is surrounded around, well, the protagonist is Donald Draper. He works at an advertising firm. They're back in like the 1960s. And this specific bit that I'm talking about, it's where I guess you have like a bit more of like a hipster crowd. Back in the 1960s, nobody was really smoking weed, and he's around a few people that are. He's in this room at the social gathering with them, and he's the only one that stands out. He's the one in a suit.
What episode is this again? I don't know if I got to that one yet.
Season 1, I think it's like episode like 8. It's fairly early on in the show.
Okay.
Yeah, and then he's just, I guess, with this more hipster crowd that isn't him, and they start giving each other a hard time.
Oh, wait, no, I remember that scene. Okay, and they're listening to, like, the record player, right?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And basically, Donald Draper, he begins to get a tough time from the crowd, and he lashes out a little bit. He says to one of the hippies, go and make something of yourself. And they all kind of perk their ears up and start looking at him like, make something of ourselves, pointing the finger at him, saying, you create desire for things that don't exist, and essentially, I guess, driving consumerism that isn't there. And then there's, unpacking the reasons for why they don't like that. But yeah, kind of portraying him as like this devious character.
Sorry, where are you going with this? Is that how you see yourself?
No. Oh God, I'd hope not. That'd be pretty dark. No, it's just to paint a picture of the stigma that can exist. I don't think it's necessarily prevalent, but just going into just like kind of picking apart how marketing can be unethical in ways, but how it necessarily isn't what that situation was painted by the hippies in that scene in that episode.
Do you think people still have a negative perception of advertising today?
That episode specifically, with the era that show is in, is way back when, 1960s, where this marketing was more so on the rise. Advertising was on the rise. I think that it's so prevalent today. Advertising is literally everywhere that it'd be hard to paint it as the bad guy when I think it's just embedded in our society as the capitalist country.
Okay, I mean, I can't really disagree here because I also work in advertising, so that'd be an interesting opinion if I did disagree with you.
That would be terrible.
Which I don't. I mean, I chose this industry willingly, not with a gun to my head or anything like that.
Specifically on again, not a stigma, it wouldn't be fair to say that, but just kind of like the whole puppet master image that some people can paint.
With cookies, right? Not that the average consumer really cares that much about cookies, but just with the notion of third-party cookies and tracking like your website history, that is the conception that the common person has. But the thing is, like, I think the common person believes that, yeah, advertising is this puppet master role in getting consumers to like buy something they don't need. But at the same time, that same group of people don't think that advertising impacts them.
Because they're aware of the situation. They think that they're removed.
Because they're aware of the situation. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you ever come across someone who is so confident that advertising doesn't affect them?
Yeah, and I think there's the same people where it's like consumerism, man. Like, these are things that we got to be, I don't know, aware of and stray away from. I think it falls into that category. No?
Yeah. But it's really interesting to me as someone who works in this industry to come across people like that who say that like, oh, like advertising doesn't affect me, because it does.
So you think it's just at such a subconscious level that even those that are aware, it still affects them? There is
a subconscious level to it, because, you know, when we talk about like awareness and like reach and frequency, people aren't really paying attention to ads. People don't really care about ads. It's really just us advertisers who care about ads. So people are coming across these messages and like these advertisements. They're not really paying attention, but they see these repetitively, maybe throughout like a single month, and that becomes like creates like that subconscious effect.
Okay. Yeah.
And to come around like almost like full circle to our episode last week, like you talked about like the repetition, right?
Yeah.
Of seeing something, and it creates this like incomplete train of thought when you keep seeing the same message and you want to close off that train of thought. Mm-hmm. For those of you who don't know what we're talking about, check out our last week's episode, the pilot episode, where we talk a little bit more about this.
I actually wanted to cover, because you said cookies isn't something that's necessarily interesting. That's something that I would cut back to, because you said the common consumer isn't interested in cookies.
Yeah.
I would not agree.
They don't care. I don't think the common consumer cares about third-party cookies. To be specific, we're talking about third-party cookies.
Anytime I hop on a website now, it's the first thing you see is a big red alert. Do you accept cookies? Mm-hmm. If not, manage cookie selections. Mm-hmm. And of course, the manage cookie selection is the most daunting page ever, where you have to manually select no to a million things, or pick and choose. I think that that's there because people care about third-party cookies. I kind of do. Even though I'm in advertising, I don't know.
Don't you care because you're in advertising and you know what third-party cookies are? But I don't know, like how many people click agree because they just want to get rid of the window?
I do that personally myself. But
does that mean they care? If they click agree just to get rid of the window, doesn't that mean they just want to get rid of the window and they don't care?
So maybe it's just about like how much they care, and if they care enough to make, I guess, noise about it. But at just like a personal day-to-day level, when I'm in advertising, I'm aware of how the cookies can be used generally. I just don't like the idea of somebody tracking me. I think that's just, maybe it's not as rational.
Okay, so we're leaning into this debate almost, or like this train of thought about whether or not third-party cookies, okay, we know they're going obsolete sooner or later, eventually, maybe sometime within like 2022. But we're leaning into this train of thought where like, are third-party cookies better when they're used or not? So essentially, like, is using third-party cookies, should we be using third-party cookies, essentially? Like, if we were allowed to continue using them, should they be used? Because you were saying that, like, oh, it does encroach on people's privacy, which is why they're on their way out.
I was more so leaning towards it's a general, just like, oh, I guess I could use your generation's word. It's just a general ick I can't put my finger on why I really
It's
don't
not quite
like
the
this.
same thing as an ick, but okay.
Okay,
We
whatever.
will let it pass.
Okay, no. I can't put my finger on why I don't like it. I just happen to get uncomfortable that somebody's tracking me. I think it's just the general idea. And if I myself am I'm in marketing, I'm in advertising, and I can't put my finger on it, I think that might be a reasonable assumption to say that the general public has that same view, where it's, I don't know why, but I don't like it. Unless you're entirely okay with third-party cookies, or you have specific reasons?
I think if you were to point out the issue of privacy and third-party cookies to the general public, then they would start to care. Then they'd be like, yeah, I don't like that. Yeah. But if we weren't to bring it up to the average person, the average Joe, I don't think they would really care. Without being prompted, without raising the topic of third-party cookies.
But I think it was a problem to the point where Canada, they put in some serious legislation saying borders of, hey, you have to let people opt out. You have to do this. Everybody has the right to see their own third-party cookie data. That is a thing. If you request from these companies to show you all of your history, that is your own personal property. And I think that these are new things that came out to play because people cared. To what degree these people care, I couldn't say. And it's even touching back to that point where I don't know what it is that makes me care, but it's just a general I just don't feel comfortable with somebody knowing that much and keeping track of me. I definitely...
Even if it provides value to your life. So even if the messaging and the advertising are not spammy, they help you solve problems in your daily life. They give you options when you come across a problem in your life.
Spotify cookies is the go. I will never, ever say no
okay,
to Spotify
so there's
cookies.
A story there. What's the story behind Spotify cookies?
Well, it's just that's what makes the platform what it is. It's so catered to what you like. And I think that's a situation where, for sure, I'm all for cookies. But I get what you're saying.
So objectively, cookies have the potential to provide a lot of value to consumers and society in general. They can predict what you need before you even need it. It's useful. It's practical. It can provide a lot of value. But the thing is, it's super unfortunate that third-party data and the messages that are being sent out right now based on third-party data doesn't provide a lot of value to people. Most of it. Do you think so? There's a lot of bad ads out there, right? There's a lot of bad messaging. There's a lot of spammy messaging. And I think that's a really unfortunate point.
It's used at a huge amount, but it's just they're not even reflecting it in an effective way. Is your problem, or potentially the problem?
Yeah, really, it's not providing value to people.
I guess that would touch back to the point of
it gets spammy and cluttery.
How we agree that Spotify is great and we've accepted their cookies because they do it effectively, but it's unfortunate.
Oh yeah, that's a good way to put it. Like you said, Spotify's and the way they use data is a great way to provide value to people.
So if third-party cookies were just used in a more effective way, people would have less of a problem with it.
I 100% think so. Do you not agree?
I think Spotify is the example. That makes sense to me, yeah.
But the thing is, that's in a perfect world, right? We live in a world where, honestly, a lot of marketing is bad.
But then how do they do it in an imperfect way? That bothers us, though. I'm trying to put my finger on that.
Because they spam. So they... the messaging just isn't interesting. Honestly, isn't that the crux of it all? Yeah. The banner ads we see that are served to us, delivered to us, based on third-party data, isn't interesting. It's boring.
Yeah, it's almost I'm annoyed. That's what you think that I wanted to see,
Yeah, exactly. But do you think it's almost like a catch-22? Where do you ever think that banner ads specifically served to us through third-party data, could they ever be interesting? Because you're so creatively, you're so restricted. You only have, 350 by 50 pixels worth of digital space to send your message, deliver your message, craft it. You have a limited budget as an advertiser based on your client, your campaign. Is it actually possible to consistently deliver something interesting through banner ads specifically?
I think maybe if you're just going specifically banner ads, I think they're just ultimately something that has become outdated. And if I'm reflecting on the bad ads that I see that are from third party, it does reflect on stuff like banner ads.
Tell us about a recent bad ad you saw. Or maybe a most memorable one. What's a memorable bad ad? Or do you just kind of like start to filter them out because they're bad?
Filter it out.
Filter it out?
It's white noise. It's white noise.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that just touches back to how we mentioned earlier, where it's just like us as advertisers, we are super aware and obsessed about like, well, not obsessed, but like aware of what we're creating. But then meanwhile, the common consumer is just like, you might have their attention for 10 seconds, and that decides whether or not they're intrigued by what you've put out. And where it comes to digital and banner ads, I think that really comes to a space where you're really putting yourself at risk of just being white noise. So I think that more so maybe that's something that needs to be phased, or that can be phased out, and that could even benefit third-party cookies down the road, because there'd be more effective ways to apply third-party cookies.
So banner ads are on the way out.
I think so. I think so. What I think would be interesting to hear is if you think that there's new applications that third-party cookies could go to as like these, well, we're saying banner ads as an example, but as these type of invasive ads get phased out.
Okay, sorry. First of all, like it's just such a big question, such a big topic. Just to break it down a little bit, I like head back just a few steps. I honestly don't know if banner ads will go away for a really long time.
So I started off outrageously.
Because I think honestly, I see what you're saying. Where like, it's interruptive, doesn't provide value, but you know what it does provide is a lot of frequency. And maybe we're not really the expert to talk on this because we don't work in media necessarily. But advertisers are always going to go where people are. People are going to be on websites and browsers for, I don't know, like a really, really long time until something new comes along. And what advertising spaces are common on browsers and websites? Display ads. So essentially, like a recap of what I'm saying is that I don't think banner ads will be on the way out for a long time because people are often on browsers and websites. Yep.
I mean, like, is it effective right now? Well, yes, that's why it's still being used. Do I think that there's a time where, in the near future, where it will be phased out? Yes, that's what I'm leaning towards.
Okay, so essentially we're agreeing is what you're saying.
Yeah, because I'm not saying
we are agreeing.
Fuck digital banner ads, or else, well, they probably wouldn't be used right now. But right now, like they're reaching the KPIs, they're still effective. Do I think that's going to continue? No, because I think that people are becoming aware that they don't like it. And
I guess the interesting point is that when you say like, oh, our banners like hitting KPIs like frequency or reach, maybe they are, but maybe as we shift more towards like influencer marketing and away from interruptive messaging and advertising, the focus isn't on reach and frequency anymore. It's about impact.
Meaningful connections.
It is about 100%. It is about meaningful connections. But maybe as we head more towards influencer marketing and content marketing, it's less about that reach and frequency and really more about engagement.
How do you do that with a digital banner ad though? That's a challenge. So maybe it's beneficial to both the consumer and the advertiser, because that's really hard.
What is beneficial?
A small. Exactly. No, the banner ads being kind of just like, maybe this isn't working out for the consumer, and it's hard for us to create meaningful impact.
Yeah.
We can start looking towards new mediums. I think that would just beg the question: what are those new mediums that you move towards? And then that's...
Yeah, it's interesting to think about this too. If you're a really small company and you have no budget, display ads, they're cheaper.
Yeah.
Than, like out of home, like a billboard, of course.
Yeah.
Display ads might be cheaper than influencer marketing and partnership with a content creator.
Yeah.
So when we think about like display ads being phased out, I feel a little bit sad almost for companies and brands who don't have a lot of budget, because where are they going to go? How are they going to get word out?
That is an unfortunate thing, yeah. And I think it just kind of just drives further. Maybe it's not too much of a leap where it's just like when you're looking at like economies of scale, the big companies are allowed to be able to be in market, of course, and that just touches on back to the ethics of marketing. And I think that's another contributing factor where you could see it as unethical in the way that not every organization can pay to play. At the
that is a really sad scenario, and it's unfortunate that that's how like a capitalist society is built. Yeah. But we talked about so many like heavy topics today. Maybe it's time to wrap it up a bit. Yeah, so okay, just a bit of a recap. What did we talk about today?
Just talked about Donald Draper. It's pretty cool. His episode in Mad Men, where
Donald Draper.
You could be the puppet master, or you could look at it as just an individual that's providing for society. Third-party cookies. Let us know, what do you think, if they're going to be around still, and if they do play benefit to consumers and to advertisers, and in what way. Of course, us being fresh interns, we're thinking out loud, talking out loud.
But we still have some hot takes. Hot take being that digital banners suck, according to Eric.
No, that's not what I said. They're effective. They're still in use. There's a reason. Is that trend going to continue 5 years down the road? I question that. And I think it'd be fair for you to question too. I don't know. How excited are you every time you see a digital banner ad that's not appropriately used third-party cookies and it's some random thing that you weren't interested in?
And honestly, even if you work in this industry, let us know if you actually care about cookies. If you don't, I think that's really interesting. Feel free to share your opinion with us. And for next week, if there's any industry news articles or topics that you'd like to see our takes on, send them our way. So this has been Between Two Interns, Jemima and Eric, and we'll see you next week for another episode of the podcast. Bye-bye.